Hello, hello, Mariana. Welcome to Ion Design League. We're having this live with all the teams that are part of this first edition of Ion Design League, and they are really excited to know more about you. So we have participants or teams from Brazil and also for the rest of Latin America. So for this occasion, we're gonna run this session in English, but at the end of the question part, we can talk also in Spanish. And if a team or a participant send their questions during the chat in Spanish, it's okay, and you can also talk in English or Spanish, whatever you want. So, well, this is an interview, and we want to know more about you, your career, and your journey as a computational biologist, but also as a founder of BioBot Analytics. So, I'm going to start with the first question for you, Mariana, and this is about your story, about you, what inspired you to become a scientist and then an entrepreneur.
I'm so happy to be here presenting to you guys, sharing more about my story, what I do today, and just super excited to be here. I am originally from Mexico City. Currently, I live in the city of Boston in Massachusetts, and my background is as a scientist. And now I am also a CEO and co-founder of a startup called BioBot Analytics. Background in computational biology, finished my PhD at MIT, finished my undergrad at UNAM, the National University of Mexico. And I can also tell you a little bit more about just my personal journey. When I growing up, I didn't know that science was a career. I am, in fact, the first member of my family to go to grad school and to go into science. And growing up, I thought that science was either a thing of the past, when you learn about Darwin, like in biology, and like you think it happened centuries ago, or the thing that happened only in movies. Like I was a huge fan of Jurassic Park, and and like believing that you could use science to do amazing things and to change the world. And at some points when I found out about just scientific research as a career, I was enamored, and that's why I went to grad school. But then doing grad school, I realized that I didn't want to be a professor. I didn't want to be an academic professor, go to work to a university and only worry about writing papers. I wanted more. I wanted science to change the world and to do more for us. And I discovered during grad school at MIT that, that as a scientist, you can start company. You can go out and say, I'm gonna solve this problem using science. And I'm going to create a company. I'm going to get money and I'm going to create a company. I'm going to hire people. I'm going to go and sell this product. And that was the next transformation for me. First was, I became a scientist, and then I became an entrepreneur. And I think at the high level, for me, just making those transitions, I didn't know I would do any of this when I was in high school or even undergrad. So it's important to be open to the opportunities, because there may be more than you were imagining before.
That's really exciting. I feel really inspired by your journey, and I also am trying to do this entrepreneur journey. And that thing about solving and not just being writing papers, that was something that really motivated myself to do. And I noticed that there are a lot of opportunities, but also some challenges that are part of this process of this adventure. So my next question will be, what were some of the challenges that you faced in this transition from scientist to entrepreneur?
Well, the first one is that as a scientist, all of my education and training was very technical. It doesn't, the the curriculum, if you are a PhD student or even an undergrad studying biology, it's very much all technical. You don't get exposure to uh, using a lot of the more soft skills that are needed to start a company. Um, you definitely don't need a business degree. So don't worry if like about going into getting an MBA or anything like that. You don't need that. You will learn business just by doing business. But it's very helpful to have support around you. And for me, um, I don't think I could have made the transition from scientist to entrepreneur without the having access to entrepreneurship mentorship programs, like like universities. For example, like at MIT, there's been a lot of investment in creating classes, hackathons, just programs like incubators where people like me can go in, can start working on your idea. You get to meet people, you ask questions, you learn by interacting with other founders, by interacting with investors, and you start learning. And in particular, as a scientist, there aren't that many scientists who start companies. So I think that there's still a need to create more, to identify more role models who can share their experience. But so I found that a challenge. But and there's sometimes a little bit of also judgment or stigma that maybe scientists should only worry about the technical part of the company and they shouldn't be thinking about just like how to build a company and how to sell and things like that. So there will be a lot of pressure to just keep your head down, worrying about the technical side of the company. But you know, it's on us basically as scientists to lean in and ask for a seat at the table, and and ask questions and just keep putting yourself out there. And I don't know, how I think about myself is I just try to do my job the best that I can. And if at some point really there's a better person to do my job, I'm happy for that person to take over. But until then, I will try my best.
Excellent. That is really great about the the adventure that being an entrepreneur represents, and all the learnings that you probably are having and acquiring during this journey. And I would like to know more about now your company, about BioBot Analytics. Is that right? And if you can tell us more about what is your work in BioBot.
Um, yeah, so BioBot, my co-founder Nusha Gailey and I met at MIT. So I was a PhD student, she was a researcher. We had been doing research together for 3 years in the space of wastewater-based epidemiology, which basically means we look at wastewater as a source of public health data, because we can get data on how many people are infected with a disease. For example, for COVID, we have a test. We do a qPCR assay on a wastewater sample. We also do sequencing analysis on the wastewater sample, and we can know approximately how much COVID there is in a community, so how many people are infected. We can see what variants are circulating in that area. So we can extract public health insights about an entire population by analyzing the wastewater. And that's our vision, that one day this data will be collected from every city, every town in the US and globally. And we want to be the company that is organizing all of that data and making sense of all of that data so we can stop the next pandemic. And at BioBot particularly, as CEO, as co-founder, my job has changed drastically since founding the company. So when we founded the company back in 2017, it was my co-founder Nusha and I. We had our first employee was an engineer. So I was still even in the lab, like doing lab work. I was still analyzing data, still pretty much hands-on. Now, since then, we are now almost 40 people in the company. So my job has changed a lot. I don't do anything technical anymore. Actually, my scientists, I would say, barely need me at all. At some point, I feel like they really wanted my input, but now I feel like they are very independent and they've become experts on what they do on their own. Um, so my job now is more about growing the company. So making sure we have the money in the bank, which means making sure I talk to investors and are bringing the money for the company. It means a lot of hiring because as the company grows and our customer base grows, work keeps piling, right? So it's very important to be able to hire fast, and therefore a big chunk of my time is spent interviews and meeting people and making those decisions as to who you are bringing to help you grow the company. That's very important. Every person that you hire, they are going to go out and hire more people that look like them. So it's very important that those early hires are really aligned with the founders, the vision, the values, because then all of the people they will bring on will look like them. So it's very, very important that the hiring is done well. And then finally, basically, I still do a little bit of like um, managing fires, right? Like if there's like a unexpected problem or issue or something, like I still jump into those situations. But I imagine over time, again, my role is going to be mostly hiring and then managing the investors.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, it's like when you are first a scientist and then building an amazing and big team now requires like you're the manager and the director of it is really exciting. And I believe that there are a lot of responsibilities with that. So my next questions is like, what are those challenging questions or problems that you're trying to solve in BioBot?
Um, well, I don't think this is unique to BioBot, but every new startup
Mhm.
is an experiment, right? It's an experiment where you have a hypothesis of, I think I can solve this problem with this solution, and that I can do it in a way that is financially uh, good, where such that I can basically, I can build a business on top of that. It will be profitable. I can scale that solution. I can sell into those customers, right? Like there's a lot of assumptions when you create a company that you're addressing a big problem, that you have a good solution, that you can sell that solution into those customers, that you can scale the solution once many customers want it, and that financially it will all make sense, that you will still make a margin and make profit out of it, right? So, and most startups therefore fail. Most experiments fail, right? Because you made so many assumptions in the beginning, and once you go out there to try to do it, well, maybe it turns out you were mistaken. And if maybe you had to modify at all what you do and you still survived, um, maybe like there was no alternative and closes down. um, it's normal. This is normal, like if it's part of the startup process, and therefore those are the big questions, and that any startup, including biobot, needs to answer for themselves. Right now we're at the point where we see enough interest from the customers, so from government, to acquire the type of public health data that we're producing for COVID-19. Now the questions we have are, can we scale that solution like fast enough to accommodate the demand? Um, what happens after COVID? Right now, there's a lot of demand for the data we produce because we are in the middle of the pandemic. Is this interest going to continue post-COVID? Yes or no, right? What products can we build post-COVID that will keep those customers engaged and consuming from the platform? Will there be a permanent change in how people assess pandemic preparedness? Ideally, we all have come out of COVID thinking it's worth investing in pandemic preparedness, because when pandemics hit, it's really bad. But that's a big assumption where nobody has the answer, and only in 5-10 years out we'll know the answer then, right? Because we'll know if people keep spending and government keeps spending on solutions or not. So I think like those big questions never stop. You just need to keep at it, and they take slightly different shapes and forms, but at the core you're always asking, is there a big company here? And that's the difference also between a startup and a small business. A startup, by definition, you are building $1 billion company that is going to get there in less than 10 years, right? Like us, like last year we went from 5 employees to 50. This year we want to go from 50 to 200, right? Like it's the scaling, it's really fast. You're not building a small business where maybe you want to have 10 employees and make a living, and that's totally fine. But that's a small business, that's not a startup. And investors will only give you money if you're building that high growth startup that is going to get to $1 billion of value within 10 years. So it's quite a ride. And yeah, I don't know if that is helpful and answers the question, but I think that the challenges and questions we have are the same that every startup has. And therefore, it's important to go into the journey, basically assuming it's not going to work out. But that's okay. Like I remember when I graduated and I went to do the startup, many of my colleagues, friends asked me, how how brave of you to go out there and create your startup knowing that most likely it's not going to work out. And my response has always been, I don't see it as a career risk, because I think if it doesn't work, I'm gonna go out and look for the jobs I would have already looked for before. Those jobs are going to still be there. If you're a scientist, you can apply for those jobs. So, they will be there. Like, I'm not concerned about that. But if it works, then basically I'm going to walk out of this a self-made millionaire or billionaire, right? So to me, like, there was no real risk, because to me the alternative was already to have a job that to go and get a job, and I was just not that excited about doing that anyways. Yeah.
Wow. Everything that you said and answer you that if that was the answer, it was perfect. I think that helped us to understand better how is to take that decision to become entrepreneur, to start working on your ideas and create a company or a big business. And now I would like to understand about the technology. When did you decide that that technology was good for a business or your value proposition, and how are you using computational biology in your company?
Um, so we think about what we do as we're integrating different technologies that already exist to deliver this product to the customer. For example, we collect the wastewater, it's processed in the lab so that we can extract the RNA, convert it to cDNA, and then basically we do either a qPCR or sequencing, or we can also do, before we can also do a different processing of the wastewater sample and do a mass spectrometry analysis, so a chemical analysis to get information on drugs like heroin, cocaine, marijuana, cannabis, all of that can be analyzed through wastewater too. So there's no real new technology there. We are using things that already exist. We didn't invent sequencing, we didn't invent qPCR. So it's more about integration of these existing technologies, and then the bulk of the work is on the computational biology side. It's about making sense of this raw lab data in order to say something actionable to our customers. So for example, in the case of doing variants of concern that are circulating in a community. That means analyzing the sequencing data, being able to detect specific mutations associated with different types of uh, variants, being able to build a statistical model behind it to support it. So it's the bulk of it is really on the analysis, which interestingly, it's not protectable either, right? Like you cannot protect Python code in order to do this type of analysis. It doesn't work like that. So, and this is not unique to BioBot, but we're seeing this a lot. Like startups that don't have any unique technology, but rather are integrating. And computational biology, I think it's one of those tools that people are using, but it's not patentable. So I think from the investor perspective, that's a little bit confusing because they are used to the world of pharma companies where they develop and patent the molecule, right, that cures X or Y, and they are less used to science companies that don't have that, don't have an IP portfolio, and it's more like integration. So I think this new wave of computational biology companies are still very much new, and the business models around them are still very much being formed and tested. And investors are very, very curious to invest in computational biology companies. They love to see, the word computational biology, but I think they are still wrapping their head around, like, then, yeah, what is the competitive edge of this company if basically what they do, anybody who has the knowledge can go and do too.
Okay. It's really interesting about how investors are have a way of think about how to evaluate or find value in a company. And well, I think one of the main things is the business model. You say that, like, how can you give or build an interesting business model to have amazing profits out of it. So the question will be, how did you build your business model? Have you iterated that and started from an idea, and now if you are validating another business model, how is this process of creating it?
Oh yeah, that I think it's so core to a startup and probably will change a few times. Right now, our business model is we charge our customers, which are government customers, we charge them as if we were a lab, like a Quest lab. Think about like a Quest lab. So basically, they send us a wastewater sample, and then we do the analysis of the wastewater sample, and we give them back a report that gives the lab result from the wastewater sample. And with that model, the good part of it is that you can easily come up with a pricing model because it's basically you can do it based on your costs, right? Like this is how much it costs me to test one sample, and therefore I'm going to add some margin on top of that, and that's what I'm going to charge. The disadvantage is that the margins when you are building a testing business are lower than if you are building a purely software business. So even though the revenue is good and the volume is great and everything, just like the margin of that you're making, the profit you're making is always going to be lower than if you were just building software. Because there's, operationally, to have a lab, there's just so much more overhead, right, to operate that. So right now we're playing with a business model where what happens if the testing is actually done by another lab, and we put ourselves as a software layer, like in between the lab and the customer, and we do the data analysis, we still do the reporting. We're just not doing the lab work ourselves. Could be a huge change in our business model, but something that we're going to be exploring because it's always necessary to be like revising the assumptions and looking for the option that gives you the best outcome.
And how do you know that was the best or the what customers want? Like, how was the discovering of creating that service? For example, like for new teams that are probably thinking of try or create a company, How can they reach uh, I don't know, customers to ask about why they want? How in BioBot discover what customers want?
You just you just go out and talk to them however you can.
Okay.
So investors, by a rule of thumb in entrepreneurship is that the founders should be making sales on their own for quite some time until the sales process becomes actually reproducible, until like you are like, yeah, I've consistently identified I can sell to this type of customer at this price point this product, until you find that product market fit, what they call. Only then you can think about hiring a salesperson to go out and just replicate it. But figuring out the who you're selling to, for how much, how, that's on the founders. Uh, my co-founder and I, again, we were an architect and a biologist, and we just sent cold emails, call them, just drop by to visit them. Um, if there was like by any chance any random introduction or connection through people that we knew, we took it. It was just by any means possible, try to get time with the customer and talk to them. And therefore, that's why it's easier if you're selling into a segment where you already have relationships, right? So from that perspective, in our situation, we were at a disadvantage because neither my co-founder or I had worked in government. So it's not that we had even like a few contacts to start with. Although we had, as researchers, we had already partnered and worked with the city of Cambridge and Boston, basically to support the research. So that's how we started. We started there, and we just knocked their door. Hey, we want to start commercializing this. Talk to us. um, but yeah, it was just like that, and just trying to get yourself in front of an audience too. Like if your target customer has a conference, try to get invited to speak there. Not as a vendor, not in a booth, because nobody's gonna be looking at you. Try to give a talk. Just try to make yourself relevant and put yourself in front of them. I think early on we got invited to pitch to a bunch of mayors in South by Southwest. We
Wow.
got leads there. Early on, I think we had a couple media articles just as we were spinning out of MIT that talked about us. And our first customer actually inbound reached out to us when they read the article. So again, just anything you can do to make noise, put up a website, write blog posts, just like anything and everything to call attention to you.
Yeah, that is really good advice. And the conferences or the networking is really important, essential in the entrepreneur journey. And I think there are really good learnings from you. I don't know if you have more learnings as a scientist and entrepreneur, and if you have been part of an accelerator or incubator program that also help you to understand how is this ecosystem.
Yeah, I did. I at MIT, my co-founder and I um, did 3 or 4 incubators. So like they were almost like classes, and that was super helpful. Then we did the Y Combinator accelerator in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Highly recommended. They accept companies and applications from any place in the world. And in fact, I've seen Mexican founders and Mexican companies go to pitch there. And I think that's a great way to get connections to investors in the US without having to relocate. Like those companies are actually, they are meant to be operated in Mexico or in other countries. And they only come to the US to fundraise. And that model is becoming more and more like common.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to relocate to the US to have a company. You can, if you want to have it elsewhere, of course, it's a great place to do it, I think. But but you don't have to, and definitely really recommends looking at Y Combinator. For us, was a huge boost in getting connections to investors and be able to fundraise the first time.
Yeah, that is. I saw that Y Combinator is amazing, and they also have a like on school for entrepreneurs that you can take before to apply the main program, and that really also helps you to meet other entrepreneurs. Well, I'm gonna change to the subject that will be more the this idea of success, and we know that BioBot is like considered one of the most innovative companies in the field of biotechnology. So, for you, what were the keys to achieve that?
Yeah, you need to um, make decision hard decisions fast. You need to make decisions before they become obvious that it's the right decision. You need to take risk. Um, we were, before COVID, BioBot was building a product to address the opioid epidemic. So looking at heroin, fentanyl, and other opioid drugs that are driving a lot of overdoses in the US. And it had been really difficult to sell it, not to build it, but to sell it, because it's a totally new type of data that had never been seen before, right? Um, so what we did is COVID-19 hit. This was, February, like early March of last year, where the first few cases were being reported in the US. And very early on, we said, should we kind of stop what we're doing and then go and build a COVID-19 solution? Imagine being a company and saying, I'm going to stop what I've been building for the past 2 years and I'm going to go out and build this new thing. I should say, in that moment, even the highest ranking officials for public health in the US were communicating that COVID would be done in 2 weeks and that it wasn't worth investing in new technologies or new tools to tackle COVID because it would be done so fast. And even with that, my co-founder and I said, let's build it. Because, what if that's not the case and we can make a huge difference? So we paused what we were doing and we actually built that COVID-19 product. And that completely changed the trajectory of the company. And it took months before anybody else was able to catch up in the market and be a competitor. And by then, we had already strengthened ourselves so much. But it was that early bet. We took that risk when it was not obvious. And that's the key. If you want to have a huge company, you have to do things that don't look obvious. They don't look like a good idea, because if they looked like a good idea, everybody would be doing it, right? So that's the risk. And then from a personal standpoint, I also think it's really important to have the attitude of being okay with failing. And I think I said this in the beginning, and I will say it again, because at one of those mentorship opportunities I had during grad school at MIT, I had the opportunity to meet a self-made billionaire. And he heard our pitches. We were all like saying how we were going to change the world, very aspirational. And the one thing he said in response to that was, if I can give you one piece of advice, is if you want to become a self-made billionaire, what you need to do is to learn to be okay with making mistakes and with people being mad at you. Because you're going to go out to create this company, to do a completely new thing that nobody has done. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to make so many mistakes. And every day, for one reason or another, somebody's going to be mad at you. Maybe it's your investors, maybe it's your employees, maybe it's your customers. And you need to be okay with that. You need to forgive yourself and just keep moving. You cannot let all of that weigh you down or you're done. So from a personal perspective, I think I think about that every day because it's tough. Like, it doesn't get easier. And like BioBot has grown so much. I'm so proud of what we have accomplished. To me, we have accomplished like 10% of, 1% of what we can accomplish. Like, I feel like we're just at the beginning. And I need to remain centered and strong, to live through that because it's just not going to be easy.
Wow, that is a really good message that you share with us. It's really important to understand how also to play and to play as entrepreneur and to take those kind of decisions that are kind of risky, but it's like a nice way of keys for success. So thank you for that, Mariana. And now, well, I think we have a lot of questions for the public, and some of them are in Spanish, and I'm gonna ask them the way the participants wrote it. So, la primera es acerca de ¿qué recomiendas para comenzar a realizar un MVP en México? Y si crees que México es un buen lugar para emprender en biotecnología.
Pues, mira, lo que te puedo decir es be resourceful. O sea, tienen que tratar de, primero que nada, tratar de entender el problema que están resolviendo. Eso es lo más importante. Empieza ahí, empieza por tratar de conectar con los potenciales clientes que tú crees que quieren esta solución. Porque si encuentras un problema interesante que resolver y tienes evidencia que hay clientes que pagarían por tener esa solución, si tienes eso, algún inversionista te va a dar dinero para que vayas y lo pruebes en el laboratorio y lo construyas y todo. Pero no funciona de la otra manera. Lo que no funciona, lo que no es fácil, es tratar de primero construir la solución, construir tu lab y tratar de un MVP, todo esto. No. Empieza con el cliente, empieza teniendo esas conversaciones, obteniendo esa evidencia, LOIs, Letters of Interest, pilotos no pagados, pilotos pagados. Hay muchas maneras en las que pueden recolectar evidencia que hay un mercado para lo que estás construyendo. Ya que tienes eso, es más fácil. Y el siguiente paso que yo diría es ir a levantar capital. Ir al Y Combinator. Yo creo que es una opción muy buena para acceder capital en Estados Unidos. En México no sé qué otros ecosistemas haya, pero al menos yo ya te indico cómo puedes ir a YC. Pero lo más importante es primero empezar a mapear qué problema estás resolviendo, cuál es el problema que estoy resolviendo y con qué solución. Créeme que no necesitas más que unas diapositivas para levantar capital. No necesitas construir nada estos días.
Perfecto. Creo que es eso, encontrar los recursos y de quien puedas justamente para definir que hay un mercado que va a pagar por ello. Voy a hacer otra pregunta, está en inglés, y es acerca de during a job or academic interview, how do we know that what relevant questions or comments are we missing?
Sorry, ¿la puedes repetir otra vez?
Sure. Bueno, durante
ya la vi aquí, una pantallita, ¿verdad?
También.
During an interview, how do we know what relevant questions or comments we're missing? ¿Te refieres que tú quieres, para poder obtener un trabajo? ¿Esa es la pregunta? No sé si hay alguna pequeña clarificación, es que no la entendí muy bien, perdón.
Y de hecho está un poquito, se pudiera dar hacia otros diferentes contextos, pero creo que sí se refiere a trabajo.
Ok, bueno, si lo que tú quieres es conseguir un trabajo, ¿verdad? Y quieres a lo mejor causar una buena impresión, pero también entender si es una buena oportunidad para ti. Yo creo que preguntas importantes que debes hacer es, por ejemplo, ¿cuál es la misión de la empresa? ¿Cuál es su visión? ¿Hacia dónde van? ¿Cuáles son los valores de la empresa? ¿Qué es lo que valoran en los empleados? ¿Qué características buscan en sus empleados? ¿Qué opinas? ¿Cómo puedo ser exitoso si me contratas para esta posición? Si soy exitoso, ¿qué es lo que te estoy dando en 30 días, en 60 días, en 90 días? Muy proactivamente tratar de entender cómo puedo evaluar que somos un buen fit mutuamente. Y se trata de valores, se trata de visión, se trata de que puedas hacer el trabajo, que haya entendimiento de cuál es lo que tienes que hacer en el trabajo, con quién trabajaría en la empresa, voy a tener oportunidad de conocerlos. Creo que todos esos tipos de preguntas, cuando yo las escucho, gente que aplica en la empresa, como que me dicen que son buenas señales. Malas señales o malas preguntas serían como estar muy clavado, por ejemplo, con el título. Pero ¿y qué título voy a tener? O, oye, quiero que me cambies el título. Es así como, ay, next, ¿sabes? O sea, esta empresa va a crecer tanto que qué importa el título. O sea, si somos exitosos, aquí todo el mundo va a salir siendo millonario, ¿sabes? O sea, como que también hay siempre ciertas preguntas que suelen ser así como red flags, pero yo diría enfócate en entender cómo puedes ser exitoso en esa empresa y que sea un buen fit para los dos.
Perfecto. Bueno, la siguiente es acerca, también está en inglés, es How much time it took you to build the company from your first idea?
Oh, wow. Bueno, pues esto primero fue un proyecto de investigación en mi doctorado. Claro que en ese momento, durante mi doctorado, yo no esperaba hacer una empresa de este proyecto. Yo quería hacer una empresa, pero la verdad nunca pensé que este proyecto en particular fuera una empresa. Entonces, digamos que estuve 3 años haciendo investigación, pero digamos, no cuentan porque mi intención no era formar una empresa en este tema. Desde que dijimos, vamos a formar una empresa y que tuvimos la empresa con el capital en el banco para contratar gente, pasaron como 1 año y medio. Y fue 1 año y medio en el que estuvimos haciendo los incubators, accelerators, todas esas cosas para tratar de conocer gente, conocer inversionistas, refinar el problema y levantar el capital.
Wow. Es que a mí me encanta, por ejemplo, la trayectoria y todo lo que tiene que ver con emprendimiento y me suena muy familiar lo que dices, ¿no? Y me imagino que los retos, aún así, que ya fuera una idea y ya fuera lo que habías trabajado como proyecto, aún así eran nuevos retos ahora los que tenían en los que trabajar. Tenemos otra pregunta. What skills do you think are critical to transform a valley, a struggle moment to a fantastic peak, and when to give up on idea?
Uf.
Muy buena.
Wow. Bueno, pues mira, es una decisión personal. Es una decisión personal. En una startup va a ser así como ups and downs y ups and downs. Y un día estás así en la cima del cielo, así como, wow, ya le hicimos. Me acaban de dar este contrato, wow, ya. ¿Qué más puedo pedir? Estamos killing it. Y el siguiente día pasa algún problema y dices, no inventes, ya. La empresa, ¿qué tal si no vamos a sobrevivir este problema? Ya ciérrala, ¿no? Entonces es así como muy up and down. En especial los primeros, yo diría 1 to 3 years, los primeros 3 años de la empresa suelen ser los más difíciles porque son cuando estás demostrando que hay un mercado para lo que estás vendiendo. Por lo general, ya que encuentras ese mercado, los problemas se vuelven otros y de hasta cierto punto un poco más fáciles de resolver, pero los primeros 3 años son muy duros porque es cuando realmente la solución podría ser cerrar la empresa, porque no hay un mercado para lo que estás haciendo. Y en esos momentos hay todo tipo de historias. O sea, hay historias de gente que la cerró la empresa y claro, o sea, fue la decisión correcta. Hay gente como los de Airbnb, que batallaron por varios años, ¿no? Antes de que la empresa jalara y ellos creían tanto en su empresa, creían que estaban resolviendo un problema real que se aferraron, ¿no? Y lo lograron. Diría yo que BioBot también pasó por su momento así de mucha dureza en el que dijimos, pues no estoy segura que haya una empresa aquí, no estoy segura que vayamos a sobrevivir. Y realmente fue momentos en los que dijimos, no, pero sigamos luchando, o sea, sigamos luchando hasta que de plano digamos, ya no podemos pagar salarios ni nada, ahí, pues ya ahí qué vamos a hacer. Pero mi cofundadora y yo hemos luchado mucho y me acuerdo que un momento que nunca se nos va a olvidar fue un momento en el que cuando nos cayó un cheque de capital, si no nos hubiera caído ese cheque, no hubiéramos podido pagar salarios en el siguiente payroll. Um, Digo, ya ahorita la verdad no creo que vayamos a pasar eso por ahora al menos, pero acabo de levantar 20 millones en capital ahorita, entonces pues ya pasaron esos días, pero pues aún así volvemos a lo mismo, hay empresas que cierran en diferentes momentos de su vida por diferentes razones y yo creo que es una decisión personal de los cofundadores que tanto creen en esa idea y que el problema es temporal y que puede ser solucionado.
Uh-huh. El equipo creo que es lo más importante, los cofundadores o cómo inicias. Y de hecho la siguiente pregunta es, ¿cómo identificó a las personas que formaron parte de su primer equipo y qué cualidades tenían?
El cofundador es lo más importante. También las primeras personas que contratas son muy importantes porque son ellos te van a ayudar a contratar a otros, ellos ayudan a crear mucho la cultura de la empresa, pero el cofundador es lo más importante. La mayoría de las startups que fallan, de hecho, ni siquiera es porque no encontraron el mercado, es porque los cofundadores acaban peleados y acaban así divorciados y básicamente se acaba la empresa, ¿verdad? Entonces, esa es la decisión junto con la idea. El cofundador es lo más importante que necesitan para empezar, la idea y el cofundador. Ahora, con el cofundador, lo importante es que entiendan qué tipo de cofundador son y qué tipo de cofundador quieren. Y hay diferentes motivaciones que la gente tiene para ser cofundador. Pudiera ser mission driven, porque creen que, por ejemplo, nosotras, ¿no? Creemos que BioBot va a cambiar el mundo, ¿no? Creemos que podemos parar el siguiente COVID. Bueno, es una misión muy fuerte, ¿no? Hay gente que quiere poder controlar, estar en una posición de poder y controlar, muy como control freak, a little bit. Hay gente que quiere el dinero, que dice, a mí no me importa lo que vendamos, lo que yo quiero es que volverme billonario. Hay gente que quiere, a lo mejor, pues no sé, creo que esas son las principales, ¿no? Dinero, poder o misión. Entonces, ¿qué tipo de cofundador eres? Y esperemos tu cofundador quiera lo mismo, porque si no, las decisiones que tomen van a estar optimizando para diferentes cosas, ¿no? Ya sea para mantener el poder, para hacer dinero o para que la misión se cumpla. Entonces, hay un libro muy bueno, de hecho, se llama Founder. Ay, Dios, ahorita lo puedo jalar de mí. Pero hay un libro muy bueno que habla sobre precisamente este tema, que igual por correo les puedo compartir el nombre.
Perfecto, y nosotros se lo hacemos llegar a los chicos. Y bueno, tengo una pregunta más de la audiencia, que si hay áreas de voluntarios en tu compañía, como internships.
Pues por lo general pagamos, o sea, no. pero pues sí, igualmente pónganse en contacto si quieren hablar al respecto. Y sí, hasta ahora no hemos formalizado ningún tipo de programa de internships ni nada así, pero pues no sé, a lo mejor esto nos da la excusa para armarlo, así que igual sí, Daniel, si puedes pasar mis datos, mi dato de contacto con el grupo también, no hay problema.
Perfecto. Y bueno, tenemos ya unas últimas 2 preguntitas más. Y igual, eso las puedes contestar en español o en inglés, pero sería, what is your challenge for IGEM participants this year? Probably some challenge that you want to share with the teams this year?
Bueno, pues yo creo que todavía no hemos salido del COVID, aunque queramos ya pensar, ignorarlo. Yo sé que hay mucha fatiga al respecto, pero yo el challenge que diría es trabajar en análisis de datos del COVID. Y les voy a pasar un dato bien padre que, de hecho, nosotros tenemos un contrato con la CDC, en el que estamos secuenciando el agua residual de varias ciudades de Estados Unidos para generar datos de genómica de COVID. Y parte del contrato nos pide que los datos se publiquen de manera en el NCBI SRA, que es una base de datos pública. Cualquier persona puede bajar esos datos. Y de hecho, ahorita hemos subido a lo mejor unas 500 secuencias, que son secuencias fragmentadas, no es una secuencia, son reads, ¿no? Que mapean al genoma de COVID. Pero en mi empresa nadie ha tenido tiempo de analizar los datos. De hecho, parte de nuestro contrato nada más es subir los datos a NCBI. Entonces, el challenge que yo les daría es, vayan a buscar nuestros datos en NCBI y mándenme qué encuentran. Pueden identificar las variantes, pueden identificar delta, pueden identificar alfa, y cómo lo modelan para tener algún tipo de certainty de lo que estamos viendo, ¿no? Porque cada variante tiene diferentes mutaciones, pero van a estar en diferentes reads. Entonces, ¿cómo piensan sobre ese problema? No es lo mismo que si estuvieran analizando los datos de un clinical isolate de una sola persona, ¿no? Esta es una mezcla de personas y todo. La calidad de los datos es baja. Entonces, vamos a tener un taller la siguiente semana para hablar de eso, pero yo diría, pues ahí está un challenge. Y en particular, pues yo de manera más general, yo diría, todavía se requieren soluciones para el COVID. Entonces, en especial en poblaciones como Latinoamérica, donde la vacunación sigue siendo muy baja, no dejemos que se vuelvan zonas en las que el COVID siempre esté presente ya de manera continua, ¿no? Yo digo que ese es un gran challenge de no permitir que eso pase.
Está increíble, me gustó bastante y sí, menciona también, Daniel, que va a haber un taller justamente para este tema que nos compartes, Mariana. Y la última pregunta, what is your advice for the biological engineers of the future?
Learn to code. Vuélvanse muy buenos programando. Está bien si también le saben al laboratorio, qué padrísimo, pero en el futuro el no saber programar va a ser como ser analfabeta, ¿no? Entonces, inviertan en aprender a code, y eso les va a abrir muchas oportunidades profesionalmente. Ese es mi
Perfecto. Sí, yo de hecho también ya ando tomando mis cursos. Gracias, Mariana. Pues bueno, pues creo que ya son todas las preguntas que tenemos. Muchas gracias por tu tiempo. Yo creo que Daniel va a dar algunos anuncios ahorita, entonces le invitamos a que regrese aquí a la sesión con nosotras. Y pues los chicos van a poderte contactar si nos permites pasar ahí los datos de tu empresa para lo que mencionabas de los interns y los futuros talleres que estemos dando aquí con IGN Design League.
Muchas gracias y saludos a todos, México, Colombia, Brasil. Vi varios mensajitos ahí muy bonitos y muchos saludos a todos.
Sí, aquí siguen los saludos en los mensajes. Y bueno, chicos, espero que hayan aprovechado mucho todos los consejos que nos compartió Mariana. Creo que fueron muy enriquecedores, sobre todo para quienes ya tienen pensado en lanzar un emprendimiento. Aquí también mensajes de Ana Laura.
Hola, hola, muchas gracias Mariana por el tiempo y por la entrevista. So just 3 messages, guys. We will send you the calendar for next week. We will have some sessions. For example, on Tuesday, we will have a workshop on introduction to human practices. So please start preparing your questions. For Wednesday, we will have a workshop with Mariana and BioBot's team regarding exactly this challenge that she was proposing. So we will know a bit more about this challenge for computational biology. And we also will have a workshop with BenchLink so you can learn how to use their tools. On Thursday, we will have an episode of IGMTV in Portuguese. For Friday, we will have another live interview with Fabricio Pamplona, CEO of Mind the Graph, another of our partners. So please stay tuned. We will let you know the details. And well, thank you for all the messages from Brazil, from Mexico, from Colombia, from Guatemala. Thanks, Mariana. It was a real honor to have you here, and thank you, Mine, for the moderation. Incredible. I'm just passing all the messages that we have. A lot of lots of love from our students. Thank you. Well, that's all for now. See you.
guys. See you
Next week.
next week.